Pursuit of Podcast, a purely guest-centric show focusing on people and organizations that advance positive change. Positivity can be anywhere, and in a time of vast discord, the pursuit of is finding those who champion its causes loudest. Join us as we sit and learn about the pursuits of local leaders in their community. Let's go.
Hello, good people, and welcome to the Pursuit of Podcast, where it's truly not us, it's you. I'm Ryan Buck, Artist Development, New Leonard Media. With me is the boss, Mark Wilson, President, New Leonard Media. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Ryan. I'm back in the gym, bro.
You are?
Yeah,
Sounds
yeah.
like that's well enough about us. Clearly, too much gab in the beginning. But luckily for us, our guest today is Rebekah Tenbrink, Executive Director and Founder, Lift Teen Center. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
Good. Thank you for asking. Well, you asked the first question, I guess. Or no, I guess I didn't. That's fair.
You know, the professionals, they like to spin it back on the interviewer.
That is right. Well, we can be honest and clear about this because we'll talk about it. You are a podcaster yourself.
Yes, I am. I have a co-host who is really my better half, of course. You got to have that. Right, Mark?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And so...
Really, always just so loquacious right at the top.
Yeah, so I do love podcasting. It's a great means to just like connect and have other people hear you. So.
That is a good point. Well, starting simply. So you're at a social engagement or a party. Do we still do that? We do
go
that
to
now. Parties.
Yeah, we're back to that.
So, okay, we're in a social setting. Let's say a party. Let's be bold.
Okay.
And somebody asks you, what do you do? What's the party version of that?
So, unfortunately, I'm a very, snarky, sarcastic person. So, I'd be like, I test batteries for a living. And then...
Tremendous.
Then they're like, oh, cool.
But you probably have to test batteries at some point in time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The Teen Center needs a lot of batteries. But I am the founder and executive director of Lift Teen Center, and I am also the executive director of the Friendship Community Center in Suttons Bay. And they're both married to one another, so...
That's a pretty good party explanation. That's good. All right, so that's enough to get a little circle of people, a cadre around you. Mm-hmm. And so now there's some interest.
Yep.
And there's a little more space on the floor. Mm-hmm. What else do you say at that point?
Well, generally they say oh, so you choose to be around teens for a living? And I say, yes, absolutely. And it's usually followed with, well, teens scare me. And I'm like, oh, no. They're the best version of all of us.
This is fascinating because I was leading towards what are the most common questions you get.
Nice.
So intuitive. And which ones do you find most value in? So continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, we've all been a teen, right? That's something we can all relate to is being a teenager. We were all different versions of teenagers, right? Like Mark, I'm sure you were the jock, yes?
It's hard not to agree maybe with that assessment because you're a fit-looking person. You wear that flat flat brim hat. You look like
terrible
a fit
at sports.
Person.
Really?
Oh yeah, and I was a very tiny person when I was.
Were you?
Yeah.
Cool.
Men in my family don't fill out until we're 30.
I think he would have fit in with the programming at Lift Teen Center.
Yeah.
I think, and we'll get into the sports part of it because I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I love it.
You get these questions about working essentially constantly with teens. Mm-hmm. And isn't that is scary a word that comes up pretty frequently?
Oh, yeah, because it's that would scare me to be with them. They're terrifying, especially in a grouping. Mm-hmm. And I think the fear sometimes is am I relevant enough to hang around them? And all of us, I think, have experienced some level of discomfort in our teens as we grew and became who we are. And so when we're around teens that are experiencing the same thing, it almost is this revert to oh my gosh, was that how I was? It really gets some self-reflection going on.
So when you say scary, there is a melangerie of different emotions going on. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is fascinating. This is a pursuit that has started for you. You've been doing this since 2016, 2017, on or about?
Yep.
So when this started, where did you think you would be right now?
Yeah, so Mark and I actually talked about this briefly. We started out of our home with no intention of it ever becoming anything at all, really. We moved to Sutton's Bay and we didn't know anybody. And my husband went down to play hockey one night and came back with a couple teenagers to start an NHL draft. We made some pizza. We're like, what do you guys do for fun in the area? And they're like, you're looking at it like there's not much to do. So we invited them back the next weekend to play cards. And weekend after weekend, our house just began to fill up with teens. So I would say there was never any intention of this becoming a 501c3 or, this mission-driven thing. It was just really about a place for belonging and connectivity. And that still remains today, that belonging and sense of connectivity. But in 2016, when we decided, this has to happen for real and with intention,
Right.
I guess I didn't really understand the scope of how much need there was in the Leelanau County area.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The genesis of this origin story is similar to a couple of individuals we've talked to on this podcast, and it's about seeing a simple need, realizing there's much more to it, and then rising to a particular challenge. But in this story, you have newly moved to this area, and your husband goes out to play pickup hockey, and it's something he doesn't do professionally. He's a registered nurse, correct?
Yep.
And a very accomplished individual on his own, but he's doing something for fun to connect with his community, and he brings home, in turn, a bunch of hungry teenagers that you have to feed.
Yes.
So initially, this means a very solid relationship because, that could have gone a totally different way if there wasn't some kind of connection there, at least between the two of you personally.
For sure. And I think the openness to that connection, meaning inviting them in. We all want to be invited somewhere. We all want to be a part of something. To be invited in and accepted, I think, is a really beautiful gift.
It is. And also, is this maybe a testament that we can share with listeners that maybe your spouse's seemingly inane pursuits, even if it's collecting records or it's collecting too many guitars, could lead to something beautiful?
I'm not here
Someday.
to enable you for the things that you
Okay, we're not getting an official endorsement on that. Everybody, sorry. We're moving on from allowing you to endorse all of your frivolous passions and here's a big question. And I thought a lot about where to ask this question, and it probably has the most mutable answer, is what is the biggest challenge to your teens right now?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that is a really...
Is there one?
Oh, I mean, I don't know if there's just one. I would say the biggest one that I am experiencing with our group of teens is truly that lack of connection outside of technology. Knowing how to engage in a group of people and knowing how to look someone in the eyes and have a conversation of any sort of depth or meaning. And it is an acquired skill to do those things. But I think it's been lost in the translation of constantly having the screen or device in their hands.
Right. And we're going to get into logistically how you help with this. So connection. Connection comes up a lot when you look at what you are doing, what Lyft does. And so shifting towards that business mindset, because you talked about this, when you decided to make this more than a basement gig, literally, and decided to make this happen. And you talked about the logistics of making it a business. But what was the first thing, for people maybe thinking about the same, what was the first official act that you did to make this something real for your family? Because you had a small child at this time, which precipitated the need to move this to something bigger or move on. So what was that first act that said, I'm doing this and I'm staying with it?
I think for me, and it's different for everyone, but there's two things. And one was to study the culture around me. I don't know everything about everyone, and we were newer to this area. And to come in and say oh, this is what you need X, Y, and Z is really a disservice. So to stop and look around and assess what are some of the needs and what are some ways to fill those needs? What are the best ways to connect with the people that I'm going to be serving? So there was definitely a lot of reflection and kind of planning, if you will. I hate using the word planning because I'm not actually much of a planner. I'm very much passion oriented, but there is a certain amount that you need to consider before you just launch.
Aside, passion versus planning. I think this
Yes.
is fascinating because you're a creative person. And in any cursory glances at what you've done and what you do, it's fascinating that a creative person can be successful in a business that is supporting so many and giving so much. So how do you compartmentalize that? How do you balance that passion versus planning? Is it all just handing off? Is it all delegation?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is to always be learning, to never like shut yourself off to like, this is how things are done. And that's exactly how I need to do it. So always learning. And I really lean heavily on my support system, which, yes, my husband is absolutely one of them. And he very much does like analyze and is like, well, you got to take A to get to B.
Yeah. This is Gerald. Can
Gerald.
we say that? Is
Yeah,
that
Gerald.
okay to say his name?
Yes, he's a lovely, lovely man.
He is. I'm probably as smitten with him as you are.
Yeah, you would
along
absolutely
this
love
journey.
him.
He sounds fantastic.
For
But-
sure. Smitten. We haven't used that since the 1900s.
That's right. My monocle, spats, and cane are outside the delivery stable.
And also, my mom early on, because she knows me so well, she would be like, yeah, you're doing it, you're doing the right thing, but like, hey, consider this. So it's really great to have that support and community around you when you're, launching something like this, because you are a pioneer in the endeavor. And sometimes being a pioneer can get kind of lonely because you're like, holy cow, am I doing the right thing? Am I going the right way? There's a lot of questions. And so you got to kind of keep putting the, one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and that was part of the first official thing that you did, because you said there was two things. What was the second kind of official, that made it a thing that was going to be permanent?
You just have to do the thing, right? Like you have to go forward with confidence.
This is
and
appealing to the
passion.
Chicago guy in me. You got to do the thing.
You got to do the thing. And honestly, I get so frustrated when I see so much like planning. And I'm like, or like meetings. It's like, no, just go do the thing. Do what you're saying you want to do. And I knew without a doubt that teens needed a place to connect and that I could create that. And so, boom.
Yeah. And we're going to get to the center, but you talked about doing the research. So that is what made it real for you. And it's, again, fascinating how you kept yourself on track. And, you could probably be looking outside as a photographer and be drawn to something else. But you felt that there needed to be a distinction between programming, let's say, for a better word, for middle schoolers and then high schoolers, older teens. So I think it's fascinating, your approach to the delineation there. How did you approach that? Because it seems like it's probably quite important.
Yeah, so there was definitely some trial and error, of course. When I was observing the community at large, I was noticing that a lot of our kids had younger siblings that they needed to care for. So it wasn't necessarily feasible for them to come attend an event that was, say, just for high schoolers because they maybe had to take care of their middle school sibling. So we kind of like started out middle school, high school, and we're like, let's see how this goes and the traction that brings. And it really did create this like core. And from there, as time progressed, we built trust within the community, within families. Then we were able to kind of begin to like separate those age groups. And, there's a lot of maturity gained in between the middle school, high school years. So it is really important to kind of keep them separate. It is
fascinating because it feels like months can change.
Oh, I know. Oh, yeah.
So you have to keeping up with this in the ways that you can. So when you said trial and error, hopefully, nobody's laughing like how much error, did you try to, have an 18-year-old play Twister and it didn't work out or what have you. But what do you mean by error? What was maybe an example of something that you pivoted on?
I think it's just that, right? The high school kids wanted to do some of the more concentrated things, like activities, whereas the middle schoolers wanted to like run around and like get all their energy out, and you're like, whoa, this is
more of that physical energy to consider.
Yeah. And like, as any parent with like multiple children knows, you can't dedicate your whole like time and energy when there's like several kids of different levels. And so as the quote unquote parent, we were like, whew, we need to be able to like hone in on each of them to be able to properly invest in their growth and evolution. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, we get into some heavier concepts when you start to dive into all the things maybe you didn't even intend on addressing at the beginning. But for the sake of asking you a concerted question, when you were looking at this as a business, how much of a culture were you looking to establish as well, a lift culture, as it were? And did you or have you even brought that to bear yet so early?
Yeah, I think like you were, asking me about like, why is it scary to be around teens? And one of the things that I mentioned was that it sometimes reveals layers of your past that maybe you haven't dealt with. And that certainly happened for me. I really struggled with mental health and actually an eating disorder when I was a teen. And what I needed was mentors to come around me and just accept and love me, be a sounding board, and provide hope best they could. And so that culture is really important, that all of our staff is really aware that that's what we're here for. And I think that hope piece is really important too.
Yeah. Well, on that note, because you said a huge word, and hope isn't a feeling you can articulate, and it's different for everybody.
Right.
And it feels different for everybody. When you're looking at staff, because you have help, and this is a wonderfully female-driven enterprise almost from the beginning, back to the 1800s with the center.
Yeah.
But when you look at the people around you, there are some maybe bigger concepts that you have to deal with than you thought of early. Did that shift how you evolved the business and brought people on?
Yeah.
Thinking, ooh, we may have to deal with somebody who has some serious challenges at home.
I think the key there is, and I know that this word is used often, but collaboration, right? So because of us being in a rural area, it's impossible for us to do it all ourselves. However, there are some really key partnerships that we've gained throughout our time that together we're kind of wrapping around this work and addressing. So, for instance, like prevention, mental health, suicide awareness, some of these bigger things that maybe we're not the total expertise on it, but hey, we've created this community of kids that trust us, that know that regardless of what they're bringing to the table, like we will love them. And so that these harder conversations with some of those like more key professionals can happen, and can happen in a safe and loving environment.
Well, you say a lot there, because you have this almost transference where you can say, yeah, teenagers are scary. The idea of I'd never thought about teenagers being scary because they make you feel inadequate, or they shine a light on something that you have been bearing for 30 plus years. But there's the turnaround, because there can be nothing more satisfying, I think it has to feel, than, I don't know, making a teenager laugh or listen to you when you really know that you see it in their eyes. So it's twofold, right? Hopefully the rewards are there in big and small ways.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, I always say they're my joy. Like the teens are my joy in doing this. It's those little menial, like the fundraising and all of like those sides of my job that like get really hard and taxing. But I walk into the cafeteria at lunchtime and I get to interact with the teens, and it like just reignites everything that I've been like pouring in to
Built-in inspiration.
Oh, for sure.
Well, start some of the early things, some of the finicky official things that maybe I'm guessing now, seeing your personality shape, that you didn't love having to do, but was working with a school system. Because it's a partnership that you have that's been very helpful for you. Was it necessary right off the bat? And if so, when did you realize it? And what were your tips to being successful with working with a school system?
Sure. So I went in to the school system with the plan and told them like what I was planning to do. And it very much was a like, okay, well, we'll see. I'm sure that there are many endeavors that approach school systems with great intentions. But it's really those that like the old saying, like, put your money where your mouth is type of thing. We were going to do what we were going to We're going to do what we said. That's it. There it is. Woo!
And say what we're going to do is good
say
too.
What we're gonna
just
do,
because
do what
declarative statements, how it goes.
Yeah. So turn it all around every which way, and that's what.
But you're doing it.
Yes.
That's the theme in this podcast. It's tough language. It's our most mafia-sounding episode ever. We're getting out. We're doing it.
Yeah, for sure. But those partnerships with the school, we didn't realize to what amount we needed the school and the school needed us, because the school's there to educate. That's their job. And we provide a whole different subset of need for the community at large. And together, my gosh, that's a really strong
one that
unit.
benefits everybody.
Yes.
You would say?
Mm-hmm. And so we've worked very well with the school because we built that trust as our foundation. And we didn't go in with the expectation, again, that we were going to change what they were doing. They needed our help. It was like, no, how do we together create an atmosphere of growth, learning, and care and compassion for the students that we're both serving? And together, it always makes us stronger.
So you came in as a willing partner. You came in with humility. You came in with a plan. And that whole we're doing this attitude. I feel like maybe you're like, whether you like it or not, we're doing this, but in a fun, artistic way. And it's working well. Can you comment on, anything that has changed and how you're working with the schools at all, or any tips to working with a school system and saying, this is who you should really talk to if you want this?
Well, I think that as an organization, it's really easy to say, this is what we do and this is how we do it. And you go into a school and you put that, kind of on their plate, right? Their massive plate of all the things that they have to do. And instead we came with how can we support your school best? And that's different school to school. We began to engage with the teachers on a higher level and, do little teacher appreciation things and really hey, what do you need? How can we help? So now we have mentoring and tutoring every Wednesday at one of the schools. We hosted prom 2 years in a row because
hosted prom.
Yeah.
Which, I know a little bit about this. I can tell you teachers love appreciation.
Yes, because they need all of it. My gosh, they're amazing humans, angels.
But to have taken that off their plate, giving some leadership opportunity is pretty extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I can't speak enough how important it is to, like you said, show appreciation, but also humbly be like, hey, we don't, tell us what you need and what support you could use.
Well, you use the word community a lot, and I know that can be probably a popular buzzword.
Yeah.
When trying to garner support.
Yep.
With a community, with the school. But that came to you pretty early, from both of your parents. Your father, a homicide detective, which we could have a totally separate podcast on, to be honest. And your mom, who also directed you toward community and your passion, photography. So this is a passion for you that started right away as a person, it sounds like, to give. Did you ever envision... because you have a master's in social work in family life education. So what was the plan, dream, and reality?
Well, I started to pursue education once I realized that I wanted to make this nonprofit a thing. And I knew that there would be question of what makes you qualified, right? And I wanted to be qualified. And I frankly, got a lot of opportunity and met a lot of amazing people through that experience that was kind of that catalyst of putting this into motion.
Right.
For sure.
And so what's something that your dad did maybe along the way that prompted you? Because, I'm thinking about a homicide detective coming home isn't really up on the community.
Yeah.
He's probably telling you things are the worst, and it's like all TV and movies that we see. So maybe you can dispel the myth there. What's something that he did to instill that?
My dad should be in a movie, but not that kind of movie. He should be in the movie that is bringing community together and without judgment, working with criminals, essentially. I remember the gang population where we lived was really prevalent, like made national news, and he was working the gang task force. And it was a really scary time because a lot of the people he was arresting were also father of a classmate, and it became this really complex
Where was
existence. It was in Holland.
This was in Holland.
Mm-hmm. And I remember he had a certain gang member who wasn't yet in prison and kind of was like on the fringe of like getting into the gang and not, like kind of like deciding, if you will. And he brought him out to dinner with our family, and and just welcomed him in.
So you saw the example of bringing somebody into your home.
Yeah.
Because this is what happened with you and Gerald later on,
Mm-hmm.
which at that time in certain areas, I'm from Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on where you grew up, you're either in the suburbs or 30 minutes away. You're never allowing somebody into your home,
No.
let alone a neighbor that may live 5 feet from you.
Yeah.
So was that profound for you, or was that just something that, no, doesn't everybody do that?
Well, it definitely was like I just thought it was normal. But like looking back, the complexity of like, sure, this person, by today's standards, like that's a dangerous person. You should probably keep your distance, but instead welcoming them in, because there is so much more to all of us than like what we always show in our exterior. And we never know what someone possesses in the best of the ways. And I know that there are bad, actions and people out there, but there's also people that have done bad things but are very innately good.
So do you think that unique, did he show you any of the rougher side of things? And do you have that dichotomy within you? Or did he shelter you from that and you just only saw bringing a potential gang member to dinner and just said, hey, all right, Becca, we need to convince this kid that we should be on the straight and narrow?
No, I think I was hyper aware, I guess you could say, of the dangers of the world. Back then, it was Polaroids that they like took evidence from, and my dad, I remember coming down, in the morning, and he was like literally asleep on the table, and like the Polaroids of evidence kind of like scattered around him, and I remember looking at them because, I'm curious. Let's be real, and being like, oh my gosh, like and he would explain the very thing that I said. There are sometimes good people that do bad things, and there's also some bad
what
people.
What age are we looking at? You're coming down, it's the Polaroids, and maybe not the first time you've seen it.
I would say probably like 8 or 9.
8?
Yeah.
Seems young, but
yeah.
I mean, it's something that's taken you in a trajectory that's pretty profound.
Mm-hmm.
But moving from that sort of potential darkness that was turned into a light to creativity, from the website, you are quoted as the bright light of creativity that we all follow, written by a colleague. Mm-hmm. So how important is creativity in the mixed bag that you call your professional life?
I feel like it's probably, for me, in the way that I operate in the world, like number one. It is when I feel I'm like creative and I'm in that space, that headspace, it's when I feel like whole.
Right.
Makes sense.
Are you drawn to creative people professionally? Is that a necessity for you in others, or can you tolerate the banal?
It's so weird because my associate director, Audrey, I like point to her. 'Cause she's usually right
I
next to
saw
me.
it.
Yeah.
And on the website, she's over here, so that was weird for me.
Yeah. So she, oh my gosh. Okay, she literally says she dreams in spreadsheets. And oh.
That's fascinating and horrifying together.
Thank you. So between the two of us, we always say that she's the light that like shines through my prism, right? Like I'm the rainbow on the wall, and she's like the light that like makes it all happen. I see the necessity for all types of people to work together. And I have learned so much from her, and have so much to learn from her and others like her. So yes, I do love creatives, but sometimes I will say that creative can-do attitude, when it's like me and someone else, it's like, oh, that's too much. We got to like tone it down. Like we're going to get in too much trouble.
So you do need, because you're running a business, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're pretty self-aware that you need to keep yourself on track. There are certain things you got to do, taxes you got to file, right?
Yeah, they come.
Can't just keep receipts, call them keepers, a la dodgeball, and just hope, your charm's going to get through the nitty gritty.
It doesn't, unfortunately.
Okay.
I've tried.
And not that we're trying to bum people out, but, we will shift on over to what we've talked about a little bit, is mental health. And I think your blog is fantastic. And the latest blog post has a Fred Rogers quote, which I think, if in all corniness aside, he is somebody who's done so much for mental illness in young people, more than he even recognized. But from an earlier blog post, it's interesting because you started before the pandemic, but not that much into it. So you have been addressing it for a little while. And in this blog post describing the year, some of your, what do you call your team?
Well, definitely my team, as far as my staff and volunteers. Those are my team.
But the students that you're helping described the year of the pandemic with words like lonely, depressing, scared, like moving into the worst thing that's ever happened, hell. And then did anything good come of it? It made my life worse. I'm in a foster home now. It's such a huge topic, the mental health piece. So starting with, and we touched on this a little bit when you started, and now, how has your approach to this at all changed?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it changed in a lot of ways, and it didn't. Because the same basis is still, like, the same foundation is there, and that is that we all need one another. And we learned when we were all, in our own homes and isolated, how important it is to have your people. But I think one thing that we really latched onto is that it's not always in the big, sometimes it's in the small. So we bought a bus during the pandemic so that we could deliver meals and all sorts of different things to the kids. So while they were at home, we were showing up at their windows with like art supplies, like, hey, I'm going to put these on the porch for you, or like we dressed up in crazy costumes and like just like did dances in front of their window just to like cheer them up. Or it's in the big and the little.
Right.
And I think we've carried that forward to what we're still doing. Like, yes, it's in those big events that we plan, the big like snow tubing events and where everybody's coming, but it's also in the little. It's in showing up in those small ways that are intentional for kids as you see the need arise.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you clearly establish, or do you think about where your responsibilities begin and end in this regard? And do you have instances where maybe you've identified a potential problem and brought that to light?
Oh, yeah. I think the thing here is, it's hard for me. I have a huge, like, empath heart that I feel like it's a little bit like Pokemon, like, gotta catch them all. And it's not feasible, right? It's not. But I know that we cast out a net, a metaphorical net, if you will. And, we're slowly, like, bringing that net in. And there are some fish that are going to kind of get through that net. It doesn't mean they haven't interacted with the net. They may have like grazed the net on their way out or whatnot. But the ones that we're able to kind of bring in, that was at my school. And man, I didn't know I needed it, but I really needed it.
Right.
to the fold and like really engage and get to know, it's always a powerful experience. And someday down the road, they may say, I remember this program. Maybe that's, them going to counseling someday, or that's them starting their own, nonprofit. Who knows? We never know.
Well, the support systems that you put in place for them, things like leadership, mentoring, you've asked the questions. They're looking for one-on-one mentorship, which was surprising to hear. You would think a lot of insecure, scared kids would be the furthest thing that they want, but they do want the one-on-one mentorship. And when you're looking at some of the things like supporting sporting events, you send people to their events to cheer them on. That is true. That could sound like the saddest thing ever, but is it?
No. Consider this. It's someone who's retired. Their kids have like flown the coop, as they say. Maybe their like schedule has kind of like lightened up quite a bit, and they're able to go to this game and like engage with their community in a way that they probably wouldn't otherwise. And stands that are generally empty because now parents are working. Usually both parents are working, and attending games is really hard, especially every game, and the stands are not quite as full as they used to be. But having those people there that they know are there, that's right. You can't put a
so
price
that's
tag on that.
the consistent theme, being seen.
Yep.
And being seen in the right ways.
Yep.
Because I'm really curious to see how you deal with technology and social media, because kids right now have access to more knowledge than, you could zap a teenager back to the 30s and they would give heart attacks to people.
Yes.
Could probably be elevated to running everything or be studied forever, right? So this is what we're dealing with. How do you approach that? How do you deal with access to social media? What's the jam there?
Yeah. So, part of that is awareness, right? And education. So, for instance, there was just a parent education night for social media hosted by the county sheriffs, FBI, and state troopers. And they put it on like, hey, this is what your kids are watching, learning, seeing on, their devices, potentially putting out into the universe. Like, you should be aware, and you should monitor your kids, right? Well, I'm going to tell you right now that there was not one parent or one person for every kid. Not even close.
Yeah.
And so it begs the whole, like, well, why aren't we telling kids this? Why aren't we telling teens the dangers? Because, I don't think they understand, like, how scary and dangerous it can be. But it also can be used for good. And so let's use it for good as well. I don't know if you saw we had a recent reel, and it was me basically like imitating teens today. And it was like teens in 2023.
I'm going to be. Where is this on the website?
It's on our Instagram.
Oh, on Instagram.
Yep.
Okay.
Lift SB. And so I'm making fun of them. So it says like teens in 2023. And I'm like, being a goof. And then it says, but also. And then it does a bunch of quick snapshots of like them tubing, them jumping off a rope swing into the Platte, them like all things we did with them. And so like, let's not put them so in a box that like they're just they're doomed and kids today and
the doomsayers.
Music was always better when you were younger.
Absolutely.
Always.
Yeah.
And has there been an unexpected side effect? Because again, everybody's terrified of the idea of hanging out with teenagers. Have you been surprised at any change to you that's happened? And if you want to be real about it on this show, if there's one thing you've picked up, an example, living in San Francisco for 3.5 years, you say hella, and the kids say hecka because they don't want to swear. And my wife and I kind of picked that one up. So is there a little something that, has rubbed off on you? Maybe energy, maybe positivity?
Are you asking if I know the slang of today? Because I will just let
if that is it. No. If it's like in incorporation of their slang, was there anything about this hanging out with them that has affected you in a way that has surprised you?
hanging out with teens specifically.
Yeah, or younger
my
people in general.
gosh. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like, just don't take life so seriously. Like, yes, there are serious things in life, but there's a lot to laugh about. And there's a lot of just being you and authentic and genuine that's so important and so needed in a world where, like we just talked about with social media, we're constantly comparing ourselves to others and, like, you know, just you do you, as they say.
That is a good one. And you bring this to bear in the Generation Perspective podcast, which is great. I specifically listened to a few episodes, the Ryan Hannon episode, because we had him on this podcast. And I love how there's just a lot of love between you right off the bat, and it's just a fun conversation. So how has the podcast been an effective tool for you to, you know, promote Lift, the Teen Center, everything?
Yeah. Well, definitely shout out to Ryan Hannon. We went to school together at NMC. That's how we started.
It's a great episode.
Yeah, he's amazing. Generation Perspective started during the lockdown when, you know, kids weren't interacting so much. And I, you know, was thinking about it. I'm like, man, wouldn't it be good just to, like, hear from the teens? Like, what do you like to do? Who are you? And their peers and community could listen in and, like, they have their moment, right? It's so important that we all, you know, are heard. And it's morphed into, like, this, like, who's in your community? You know, like, who are you bumping shoulders with and you don't even know? And also, like, there are ways that you intersect with them. For instance, one of our teens, Sophie, that we interviewed, she made me this knit cowl because I told her I, like, love soft cowls. And she, like, made this for me. Had I not interviewed her, would I have known that she was, like, an amazing knitter?
She's the one who crochets?
No.
There's another one that surprised you that she crocheted.
Nope, that was a different person.
Okay, and that's not crochet. I'm sorry if I've made a knitting faux pas.
How dare you?
It is a thing. It is a thing. I'll recognize that. Should we do a retraction?
Yeah, you should probably take that out.
We can. We'll do.
Stays?
It'll be an official
Mark
retraction.
says it stays.
If it was your mistake, it would go.
Oh, thank you.
Ryan's mistake, it stays.
Let's keep that. Yeah.
Just unflatteringly portrayed, no matter how. But finding these, a hidden talent, something, but time was spent.
Time was spent.
And that's okay that made you feel good.
Yeah. And I mean, also, we have some different professionals on there as well, like within the community that share about some of the professions they do, which I don't know that, like, I would have ever thought of doing.
Yeah.
Definitely not when I was a teenager. And so to hear, like, oh my gosh, somebody actually scuba dives in Lake Leelanau to pull up the, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on what it's called. It's like a certain weed, but it's very invasive.
Oh. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
I'm not.
Annalise, she's going to be like, I talked to you for an hour about this.
This is going to generate discussion, frustrate a few listeners, because I don't know it either.
Yeah.
That'll be on me as well. This is not a positive episode for me here.
We should have fact-checked some of this. But anyways, the whole point being it's exposure as well to some of these, like, people and things and,
right.
different lives. So.
And you have volunteers, you have people who help, you have job mentors, as you mentioned, and you take that very seriously. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you have to take seriously. What is the state of getting volunteers now? Because there's so many different pulls for people's time.
Yes.
So what's your approach right now?
We had, like, a great base of volunteers pre-COVID. And then COVID hit and we lost every single one of them because of either moving, job shifts, or, some were elderly and didn't want to be exposed.
Sure.
It just happened.
Yeah.
So we are now building that back up. And I think we're at about 25 volunteers that are, like, signed on and have gone through our training. And are actively engaged in our program, but we're always looking back for more.
Oh, that's incredible. And what's the best way for people to find out? Is it the website the best way to find out about volunteer opportunities? Mm-hmm. Obviously, talking to somebody who has worked with you, who amongst your organization is a champion that doesn't get talked about enough? Somebody who maybe finds new opportunities for you, finds new volunteering opportunities for you. Is there anybody in your organization that, is somebody for others like you to look out for and to develop?
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's very hard to narrow down, Ryan, because truly I believe that everybody is a champion for the organization, and we wouldn't be where we are without each one of their specific talents and gifts and my goodness. Yeah. I mean, many people are coming to mind.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's a good answer to that. Because it's a tough question.
That's a tough question.
I said we weren't a hard-hitting podcast, but that was a tough one.
I know. You were like, don't worry. This will be easy.
That wasn't a softball. That was tough. But thinking about maybe a little bit of that connectivity, how do you stay relevant with teens? How do you stay up with what's going on? Can you just be on Instagram and all your friends are like, what are you doing? And you're like, I'm TikToking because I'm working.
Yeah. I think the important thing is not to stay relevant with teens, because that makes you not relevant, right?
Because you're trying
to.
Yeah,
Makes you goofy.
Yeah, if you're like, what up, bro? They're like, bye.
Depending on the grade level, that's changed in 6 months anyways.
Absolutely.
So you want a certain level of irrelevance, of naivete.
Yeah.
Hopefully charming naivete.
Yes.
Like, I don't know how to make this fangled Instagram work.
There's that. One of they were teaching me slang, and one of them. So there's this smacks. This meal smacks.
Smacks.
But then there's also this slaps.
Slaps.
So I like to use those interchangeably in, ways that don't actually make sense. And then they get really like, oh my gosh, why did we ever teach you these things,
Start making up your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Many new things are made.
This crackles.
This crackles.
Snap, crackles, and pops.
Yes. So.
Oh, maybe you have to pay Kellogg for that. Well, you've given a lot of advice on how, one can maybe successfully identify what a challenge is and recognizing how big the hurdles can be, but you've done it. So I hate to ask an obvious question, but what do you see happening from here? What's the next thing you're focused on? Because you can't play the irrelevant card because you're a podcaster. So these young people are looking at you like, so you're unfailingly cool. You have this engagement. What is next? What are you looking to do in the next 1 week to 20 years?
With Lyft specifically?
Correct.
I have this crazy dream that I would love to open a coffee shop that our former lifters and our current lifters run. And it would teach them job skills. It would teach them all the things that everybody complains about teens for.
So tying into a practical business, that can
Absolutely.
That's a
business
big
skills,
stuff.
customer service, all the things.
Because you talk about that. You talk about kind leaders, which I think is great.
Yes.
And is that something that, was taught to you that you feel is important to employ?
I don't know that it was direct. I mean, it was taught to me, sure, by my dad and, other mentors along the way. But I definitely think there's more of a need for it right now.
And you are a photographer.
I am a photographer.
And you have a legit photography business, and is bringing more arts and creativity into the fold something that has been talked about? Or is that something that is too on the nose maybe for you? Or
with current school right now, we're doing a photo voice project. So I'm teaching them how to capture images that speak words that aren't actually words. You know what I'm saying? They're learning how to say this lamp right here, I turned that lamp on the night my dad died. Things that have meaning, and they're not always known and it's not always expressed, but how do you capture that creatively?
And that's a theme in your work. I'd read that you're looking to find a voice within an image.
Yeah.
Whether it not be necessarily somebody with their mouth open. That's unique. So abstract concepts, kind of well-rounded, which is fantastic.
Writers call it show words, not tell words.
Oh, interesting. I've never heard that.
Kind of when you paint the picture. But,
Cool.
It's all very visual and it's all very beautiful. Well, you do, to conclude, you talk about humor. I think it's interesting. A lot of people talk more about humor than than you would think in reacting with teens, because you think teens have to be this humorless dour group of people, and they've gone through this unimaginable thing. Hell is what they're talking about. So on your website, which is liftyouthsb.com, correct? Mm-hmm. Liftyouthsb.com. There's some information. There's great information. There's information on you all. So I've got to ask 2 questions to end here. Is what is the importance of cheese? And as a photographer, family photographer, people are gonna stop taking photos as a family with their shoes off?
Oh God, I hope so. You know, it gets really uncomfortable because you have to decide whether or not to crop their feet out if they're like ugly feet, or like, do I chop their feet out and like replace them with like a model's foot? It's like, it's just creating so much work for us as photographers. Like, wow. Please put your shoes back on.
All black, no shoes. I don't know if that's irrelevant, but and so thank you for that. And so hopefully we can change that. And cheese. Your favorite cheese is brie. Is there that's a consistent question amongst your leadership? Like, your favorite cheese? Just
our
curious.
Social media person, Claire, this is her go-to question. What's your favorite cheese? Okay. And like, I'm not one that like just like thinks about cheese. So like, I was like, oh, brie? Because I really do like it. It's like nice and stuff.
It was more of a question. Like, it wasn't an answer. Is this a cheese? Put it on the website.
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because once I was growing up, I found out that my favorite cheese, in fact, isn't even really classified as a cheese.
What is it?
Well, they call them American slices now.
Oh, you like chemicals.
Ooh, yeah, that is true. Well, it's extraordinary, all of the things that you have done in a short amount of time, and I can't wait to see what you do. And the coffee shop sounds amazing. Is there anything that you would like to leave our listeners with, or anything that we missed?
Well, I think the biggest thing, and we are growing in big ways. We started out in one school, we're in 2 now, and half-time in another, is that we want to be in 5 schools in the next 5 years. And that something like this coffee shop dream, as much as I'm a can-doer, you can't do if you don't have funding. And so the investment of the dollars really is making a huge impact, as well as those volunteer opportunities, because gosh, we'd be nothing without relationships and other people. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, you are a very altruistic leader, and you're somebody who clearly gives a lot, and we're very fortunate to have had you. And again, the website is liftyouthsb.com. Is that the best way to keep up? Are there any newsletters that one can sign up for? Any QR codes to be found anywhere to connect?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is just sign up on our website. There's like a contact us, and we'll get you plugged in the right way, depending on what you're interested in.
Beautiful. Even if it is cheering along a sports team, and that sounds like an awesome use of an evening, especially in our community. Well, Becca, thank you so much for your pursuits, and to all of those who pursue along with you, ensuring youth in our communities have a safe place to grow and thrive. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
And to our listeners, thank you all for listening, and thank you for pursuing the positive.
And there you have it, folks. Another episode of The Pursuit of Podcast. We want to thank Rebekah Tenbrink for coming in from Lift Teen Center, Lift, Leelanau Investing for Teens. You can find more at liftyouthsb.com. That's liftyouthsb.com. And as always, for all things audio, video, podcasting, check us out at newleonard.com.